Welcome, everybody. Getting on already. I see Peggy. Man, Peggy, you got a full house behind you. What in the world is that?
That's my craft room.
Oh, my word. I was thinking it was a craft room, but I didn't want to say it if it was something else.
Chad might call it the crap room, but it's the craft room.
Nice. I see Junior on. Thanks for being on, Junior, Paul, Richard Hamilton, Brian, Aaron, Adam, Nix. I don't know who that Nix is. Adam, I'm expecting a pretty big group at the meetup group on Thursday, so hopefully you are as well. Awesome. Welcome everybody. Amanda. I see Amanda on there. Welcome, Amanda. Linda. People are still Randy. I don't know. I just see a black screen for Randy. But welcome. I know I got a couple people that are supposed to be jumping on here because I'm supposed to be meeting for lunch. But we're going to get started here in just a little bit. Always like to give some time to let people jump on and get to learn what we've got going on today. I'm going to share my screen.
Come on, let's go pee-pee.
Welcome. All right. Welcome to the call, everybody.
Let's go this way.
I'm having a hard time on my PowerPoint in here. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. All right. Well, welcome everybody to today's call. We're going to talk today about something a little bit different than investing. The last couple calls we've talked about, different investment tools. Last call was really great with Dave Zook about talking about tax strategies and ways that you can invest in different things that sometimes we don't know about. Dave talked about having a problem. He had a $500,000 tax bill and wanted to figure out how to not pay so much in taxes. So we kind of do make this a little bit of a free-for-all. We kind of talk about that a little bit. So we go from a little bit of different topics. Sometimes it's going to be investing. Some is just regular investors. And I'm excited about next call. And it's just going to be a regular guy who's been doing this for many years, 30 plus years. And he's going to talk about creative financing and creative deal structuring and acquiring deals. So you guys should be excited about that. But one of my great friends, Mary Hart, is going to be on today. I'm excited to have you on. Welcome, Mary. Thanks for being with us today.
Hey, Tom. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this talk.
Yeah. So Mary, I've known Mary for about 10 years. So we actually met way back on some cruises like that we've talked about. And I'm going to even pitch a little bit of a cruise today for you guys. And one thing kind of have led to another, and we've spoken at different events together. And Mary's a great person. You guys should get to know her. And I'm excited about today's call. We're going to talk about she's been an attorney for many years, and she's helped a lot of people with estate planning. But just recently, she started talking about something that gets me really excited, and that's about not just leaving a legacy, not just estate planning, but also living out your legacy today. And it's in really talking about what you leave in people is so much more important than what you leave to people. And I'm really excited. I'm really proud of Mary for that talk. I honestly have heard somewhat of this talk for about 2 different times, and she's probably not going to be able to give you as much of the story as I've heard, but I'm excited about having this on today. Next call is with Leon Johnson, and I just met this guy in the last couple of years, but I'm telling you, he is full of a bunch of knowledge. He's a giver, and he loves to give to people. He loves to teach. He loves to help, and really he loves to help create win-win solutions for people. So if you are trying to acquire properties especially in this market. I think some of the strategies he teaches, and really the mindset behind what he teaches about creating win-wins for people is going to be super powerful for you guys. So again, like, this guy's super down to earth. And he just got off having a pretty big event that he just put on himself, but you guys will enjoy him April 10th. So again, that's going to be a Monday. I know we've been kind of jumping these calls around within the certain days. Some of that depends on when the speakers can be on. And I'm just trying to figure out which days of the week work best for people. We've done these on Saturdays and Thursdays and Tuesdays and Mondays, but the next one will be on Monday. So Monday, April 10th, be on here and tell your friends about this as well, because you guys will not want to miss this. So I am promoting a couple events. I want to let everybody know about this. This is the next one I am speaking at here. This is Deal Maker. Actually, Mary is going to be the keynote speaker for that, and I'm excited to hear Mary about with this as well. So this is going to be May 9, 10, and 11. And I don't think there's too many tickets left. So if you guys are interested in going to this event, it's in Richmond, Virginia. And Jim Ingersoll, I'm trying to get Jim on for the May call. So, right before this deal, or it might end up being right after this, but we'll see how that works out. But this is an event I would highly recommend you put on your calendar every year if you can. Also want to talk about this last call. We're going to continue to kind of promote this. And I think Peggy's on here as well. Peggy and Tom and Tanya are putting on this Investor Addicts Cruise next year, February 11 through 18. We just did that this year. And again, if you want to be stuck with a bunch of real estate investors for a week, I promise you it'll be worth your time. And what better place to be able to network and kind of trap yourself in a room with people for a week than on a cruise. So it's not a huge charge for the actual event. Obviously you got to pay for the cruise. But $299 right now, but soon it's going to go to $399. So I think you guys can go to investoraddicts.com for that if I'm not mistaken. I don't have that slide here, but it's investoraddicts.com. If somebody can put that in the chat, that would be great as well. I always like to talk about what's kind of going on with me for the last month. So I drove down to Pensacola, my second market, and got this little house ready for short-term rental. I got it, like, I just did the last couple final touches, getting the Wi-Fi set up and just making sure it was kind of, good enough, because this is the first deal that we've done outside of our own area. So spent some time doing that. And then as soon as I got back, I had to get my daughter up to the dentist. So our dentist is actually up in Michigan. So our whole family went up there, and most of our family went to the dentist this day. And this tough girl had to have a root canal. So pray for her. She's doing actually really well. She's a tough cookie. Barely took ibuprofen for only about a day. And then also my daughter Lily performed in a performing arts, and she got a first superior on her song there. I'm actually not going to play it all, but she practices like 2 hours a day, and she really is amazing. I'm super proud of her. Upcoming, I do want to let everybody know about the senior trip that I'm sponsoring, and I just want to continue to let people know about this. And if anybody else is interested in helping with this, we pretty much do have the funds that we need, but any extra would definitely be appreciated. And this will be the last time that I'll be talking about this, because their senior trip is going to Costa Rica. So it's kind of half missions trip, half senior trip, and I'll be going with them. And I do want to thank everybody who's on the call who did donate to that, and I appreciate you guys for jumping in on that. Lots of my friends, I probably had 10 different people that were outside of our church community donate to that, and they're all in my real estate network. So I just want to let everybody know I appreciate that. Also want to remind everybody about the free for all event. Get your VIP tickets. And this is September 7 through 9. We only have 120 seats, guys, and we already have 69 that have already been taken. So that's a long ways away to only have about 55 seats left. So get your tickets for this. We do this for 3 reasons. Number 1, to build community, to build your network. Number 2, to have fun. And number 3, for education and to do deals. We're going to do a deal board this time as well. We're going to have a whole board that has halves, things that you have that you want to maybe sell or get rid of, or maybe you have money you want to put in deals, and then things that you want. So, and we're gonna have a lot of fun. We have karaoke one night. We do real estate horror stories one night. We have a food truck that comes one night. We're doing Chicago style pizza. And we have a bunch of fun with it as well. If you guys want the videos from the last event, this is where you guys can go from the last event as well. And so goodsuccess.com, free for all real estate investors event. You guys can get the videos for the last event. This week's meetup group for your local people. So we do have a local meetup group. We just started last month. And if you don't know Kevin Hutnick and you're local, you should know him. He probably has the fastest growing single type brokerage in the country, honestly. Like in the last 2 or 3 years, he's gone from like 0 to about 800 agents. And they have done over $1 billion in real estate. It's just amazing how quick he has done. My wife has a listing leaders affiliated licensee underneath his listing leaders. And he's a regular guy. He's a regular guy that, just like me or you, in 8-9 years ago, was just a realtor and just thought, hey, I'll try this on the side. And he's really built something really special. And he's going to talk about kind of being a realtor, but he's also going to talk about his own personal rental portfolio and how he thinks about real estate, and how he puts this all together from a real estate investor's perspective. But I'm going to tell you, you guys are going to enjoy him, and you'll enjoy. There's a lot of wisdom he's got. He does things a little differently than some people that I know. For instance, all of his rentals are cash. He's a cash investor. Like, he doesn't leverage, doesn't do it. Every one of his things are all cash. Just, he builds it as slow as that, but he's building his business as fast as he can. So he's a good guy. You're not going to want to miss this March 16th, 6 p.m. right here at our office. If you guys need information about that, or somebody can put the address in the chat if you guys are local. Love to see you guys on Thursday. Don't forget about next month's call, April 10th, with Leon Johnson. And don't forget to be a conduit, not a bucket. Live out your legacy. Don't just leave a legacy. And we're going to talk about that right now with Miss Mary Hart. Thanks again, Mary, for being on.
Thanks for having me. This is my favorite topic these days. I love this topic.
It's my favorite topic all the time. So
it's a good topic.
I like talking about this more than I like talking about real estate deals. And I like talking about this more than I like talking about, anything, seller finance, lending, turnkey rentals, short-term rentals. I would much rather talk about, how you treat people. So,
great topic.
Just so everybody knows, me and Mary have talked about this a little bit. It's gonna be a little bit different than our normal call. Mary is just going, the first part of this, I've asked her to really talk about not just leaving a legacy, but also living a legacy. And we're just going to try to have a conversation. We didn't really plan this out, and script this out very well. So I'm going to kind of let her talk about her stepdad, Bill. And then towards the middle of our call today, she has prepared a short presentation about mistakes that people make with estate planning. So kind of get more into the nitty gritty and all that kind of stuff. So I'm excited about this. So Mary, just tell us a little bit about Bill, and tell us a little bit about how he taught you, how to live out your legacy. And I'll just feed off of what you give me there.
Yeah. Before I talk about Bill, because he's really the example, I want to talk a little bit, if it's okay, Tom, about what legacy is and why I think he embodied it. We'll hear when I talk about him. But you heard me, I think, talk about this at Jim Ingersoll's Dealmaker last year. That was the first place that I really started talking about legacy in terms of living your legacy. And Jim had asked me to talk about legacy, and I started to sit down and write the presentation about what most people think of as legacy, that estate planning piece, that what you leave to people or to your causes when you die. And as I started trying to write that, I just couldn't write it because my brain was just telling me that's not the story. That's not the story. And so I listened to what my inners were trying to tell me, my inner voice, and it essentially was telling me that legacy is, and I heard this quote somewhere that resonated with me, legacy is not what you leave to people, it's what you leave in people. And that sort of started this whole open gate of ideas that I had about living your legacy. And I'm certainly not the first person to talk about living your legacy as opposed to leaving your legacy, but I've just given it a lot of thought lately. In the last year or so. And I realized that well, in order to live a legacy and leave things in people instead of to people, that really is based on how you live your life, you know, the choices you make every day. And a lot of times it's just the quiet decisions you make. It's not something you go out and announce, hey, I'm leaving a legacy, I'm living a legacy. It's just the way you run your life. And it's the way you treat other people. It's the way you treat your family. It's the way you participate in your community. It's the way you support your favorite charities. It's the way you mentor other people. And remember that you started at the beginning in whatever you're good at and how you help people go forward. It's how you support others, both financially and emotionally and every other way, those who aren't as fortunate as you. So there are just so many ways you can live a legacy. Just leaving things better than the way you found it. You know, you borrow someone's truck and you put more gas in it than you found it with. That in a way is a legacy because it's the way you live your life, always trying to be better and model that behavior for other people. So as I was going through writing this presentation last year for Jim, I started thinking about the examples of legacy that I thought I had seen in my life, and my stepfather's life just really popped into my head as a very good example of that. And his name was Bill Stanback. He died in 2018 at the age of 95. And he came into my life when he married my mother when I was 15 years old. And part of the reason that Bill was so important to me is because my biological father, who I love very much, who recently passed away, he actually left the family when I was 12 in the middle of the night. He just walked away with my mother's best friend. And we didn't hear from him for a long time. And so that legacy to a 12-year-old girl was a legacy of abandonment and just how could your father just walk out of your life and never want to see you again? I mean, we all had a great relationship, I thought. So I was coming into this new stepdad relationship, not really sure how I felt about dads, right? I mean, I loved my father, but I was, you know, I had some abandonment issues, I think. So anyway, Bill came into our life when I was 15. I was 15, my brother was 12 or 13, and my sister was 11, I think. And he married my mom. He was 55 at the time, which to me seemed frankly ancient. And my mother was only 39. I'm now about to turn 60, so 55 doesn't seem ancient anymore. But anyway, he came into our lives and his wife had died. He had 3 teenagers, basically a 20-year-old was his oldest child. And he had, let's say I was 15, he had a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old, and a 20-year-old. So he had 3 children. His wife had died, I don't know, a number of years earlier, 4 or 5 years earlier. So he had no hesitation about jumping into this relationship with my mother, who came along with 3, you know, teenage or preteen children. And he never treated us from the moment he met us. He never treated us really any differently than he did his children. You know, we weren't introduced as his stepchildren. We were his children. And he never made us feel lesser somehow than his children because we didn't share his last name or he hadn't raised us from birth or anything like that. And so the first lesson, really, legacy, I think that Bill left in me was the realization that men, not all men abandon their families, and that there are men out there who will willingly accept you into their lives as a child, even if they weren't your real father. So he was an incredibly loving man from day one. And I've never seen anybody treat a woman as well as my stepfather treated my mother, even in times when my mother was quite difficult. And she'd be the first one to tell you that. And unfortunately, she died 2 years ago. So I don't have any of my parents anymore. All 4 of them are now deceased. And so it makes you think a lot more about the legacy that each of these parents has left. Well, when I started thinking really about Bill, and this came up for me during his funeral, my stepsister was supposed to give the eulogy, and she did give the eulogy. But I woke up that morning realizing that there was a whole different story about Bill that needed to be told. He was a philanthropist and a civic leader and just a really amazing man, which I'll talk about a little bit. But there was a whole legacy of what he left in me, in my heart, in my mother's heart, in my brother and sister's hearts, that allowed us to now pass that on to our children and the people that we surround ourselves with. And I'm not sure I would be the person I am today. In fact, I'm sure I would not be the person I am today had Bill Stanback not come into my life. But his, you know, he was a very quiet, unassuming man. Do you want me to share his picture? You'd ask me about his picture.
Sure. No, that'd be great. That'd be
Let
awesome.
me try to pull that up. Let me see if I can.
While you're doing that, I just kind of wanted to just reiterate a little bit about, you know, what you said already. So it's what you leave to people is not really the story. And this is why like people resonate so much with the story. Like a lot of your books nowadays, even like a lot of your best-selling books now, you know, they don't just give principles. They kind of like give a story about why this is so important. But the one thing that you said as well about like why this is so important, and you can see it very well in poor people, but you can also see it very, I think, in with richer people, with people that have more means, it's like magnified. It's like you can either have a lot more of a legacy. You can really, you know, it's very easy to see what's going on there. And I've been introduced to the family office group for the last 5 or 6 years, and this is one of the things that they say. They literally say, you know, the reason why generational wealth doesn't continue when it comes to money is not because of the money. It's not because they didn't make money. It's not because they didn't have a good business. It's not because they didn't have a good product. It's not because of all the things that we love to talk about and everybody gets so interested in. It's really like, what did they instill in the kids? What mindsets did they leave? What just simple rules of life, like how do you treat people? Just those simple little and then it really gets into kind of like governance, but governance is only passed on from one family to another family because you kind of have to have boundaries of how you created it. Like the person that creates the wealth kind of has to have these things, how they live their life, and they have their boundaries, but a lot of times those boundaries don't get passed on to the next people. So it's kind of mindset, it's boundaries, it's rules to live by. And then it all kind of goes together. And I love it. So this is a picture of Bill. I'm excited to hear some of the
This is
stories.
my mom, Nancy Standback, and my stepdad, Bill Standback. And you can tell he's got a little twinkle in his eyes. He was an adorable man. And it was funny because I always said he looked like Ziggy. I'm dating myself, but if you guys remember that cartoon, Ziggy, the short bald man. And when my mom met him, and she was 39, he was 55, like I said, and she was actually engaged to someone else who was living on the West Coast. And we were supposed to move out there. And I was very excited to reinvent myself. I was 15. I hated my life. I was total teenage angst. And I wanted to go reinvent myself out in Portland, Oregon with the man who owned a skating rink. I thought that would be awesome. Well, mom met Bill and realized that she needed to end her engagement because she really loved him before they even started dating, Bill. So anyway, Bill came into our life. He married my mom in March of 1979. Like I said, I was 15. And I learned so much from him. Before I talk more about what I specifically learned, I want to talk a little bit about the public side of Bill, the philanthropist side, the civic leader side. He was a well-off man, and his father had started Standback headache powders and had made a lot of money, and Bill had invested well. Bill and his first cousin, Fred Standback, ran the Standback headache powder company for a long time. Well, Fred was business school roommates with Warren Buffett of Berkshire Hathaway. So Bill and Fred invested with Berkshire Hathaway when it was a brand new company. And for those of you who know the story of that company, it's quite amazing trajectory of wealth with Berkshire Hathaway. But anyway, so Bill had quite a bit of money, but you would never know it if you met him. As you can see, he didn't dress fancy. He didn't talk fancy. He didn't act fancy. He was not snobby in any way. And I have a funny story to tell if we have time about that. But anyway, he gave a lot of his wealth to support causes that were not always the ones that were for the sexy money, so to speak. So we had household help. And he paid every one of those women who worked in our house over the years a full pension, private pension for the rest of their lives till the day they died. He put them through college if they wanted to go to college. He put their children through college if they wanted to go to college. He offered full scholarships to people of color and underprivileged people who could not afford to go to college otherwise. He endowed scholarships at colleges. He never wanted to be acknowledged for all those things. He was acknowledged, and he was always terribly embarrassed by it. If we went to some ceremony that acknowledged him or my mother, he was embarrassed by it. That wasn't why he did it. He just wanted to be quietly the person who helped others. And he was a civic leader in our community. He was a mayor for a long time. And after that, he continued to help on every committee he could and do everything he could, but very quietly. He just wasn't arrogant. He didn't announce it at all. When my brother and sister and I and my mom came into his life, because my dad had run off with my mom's best friend, he not only did that, but he cleaned out every bank account and everything else my mom had for us. And she had not been working since she had been a mom. So for 12 years, she had not worked. So she was left penniless pretty much. And so when Bill married my mom, he wanted her to feel like she was not beholden to him. So he literally gave her enough assets in her own name to support herself the rest of her life if she wanted to. I mean, in their first year of marriage. And he said that her estate plan should just go to her 3 children. Now, they ended up changing that later in life and everything went to all 6 of us kids. But anyway, I thought that was an incredibly generous gesture. This is his second marriage. And he was more concerned about making sure my mom had her own independent means than worrying about whether she was going to be stuck with him. So I thought that was a pretty big legacy as well. So he did all these things that were very philanthropic and civic. But what he left to me, he taught me so many things, not only by the things he said to me, but by watching him and the way he acted around us. And so I've got a list, if you don't mind indulging me with a list, because I don't want to forget anything. These were the things that I talked about at his funeral when I woke up that morning and I said, there's another story that needs to be told. And I'm not going to go over the whole thing I said at the funeral, but the few lessons that Bill, not few, really, there are a lot of them, lessons that he taught me or include the following. One is to always seek to understand others, but before being understood yourself. I think this is a really key concept because particularly this day and age, there's so much divisiveness in our country and amongst people who know each other and don't know each other. There are people who are best friends who are now hate each other over politics. There are people who don't agree with people's lifestyles, or some people say it's a lifestyle. Some people say it's the way people are born. It doesn't matter what it is, but there's so much divisiveness. And so I think that if every time you disagree with someone, before you try to convince them of your position, if you sought to understood where they're coming from and you go back to the age of a true, civil discourse among people who disagree, we would be better off as a country. I really believe personally that we are a country of freedom to think as we want to think, to live as we want to live, as long as we're not, hurting others. Everybody should be able to live the way they want to live. I'm probably a closet libertarian. But I think that Bill wanted to respect and give respect to other people, whether they thought just like him or not. So I thought that was very important. He also taught me early on that it's important to allow people to save face if there's a need to confront them for any reason. So it was the way that he handled disputes with others. It never got personal. It never got vitriolic. It never got, you're a bad person, no name calling, anything like that. And he always taught me to sort of don't lower yourself to someone else's level if they choose to be that way. I remember there was a story where we had senior skip day in high school, and I had a brand new watch that I loved my watch, and I took it off to go swimming in the lake at senior skip day, and it got stolen. And there were people who saw the girl who stole the watch, and she was an underprivileged girl in my high school. And I knew she stole it. And in fact, she wore it to school the next day. I saw it on her arm. And I didn't know what to do. I was just so upset. And so I talked to my stepdad about it. And I said, I know she has it. I want to go get it. Let's go to her house. Let's go get it. And he said, okay, we'll go to her house and we'll ask about it. But if she denies it, you just thank her and walk away. And I was like, why? That's ridiculous. I know she has it. She's a, you know what? And he's like, look, you don't have to have that watch. It's just a watch. Let's go to her house. So we go to her house, and she lived in a very rundown house in a rundown neighborhood. And her parents opened the door. And, my stepfather said, we're here because Mary has misplaced her watch. And she's talking to the people who are at the lake with her. And she thought maybe your daughter might know where it went. So they went and got their daughter. And she completely denied it, of course. And I was seething inside, just seething, because I knew she had it. Anyway, we asked a couple of questions, and she vehemently denied having it. And so we just left. And it took me a long time to understand why that was the appropriate response. And the bottom line was, guess what? I could get another watch. It was just a watch. This girl, we don't know what she was going through in life. We don't know if she had food to eat, if she was being abused, if that watch meant more to her than anything in her world, because she'd never had anything like a nice watch. And so I learned that I am so fortunate and so blessed, and it's just a watch. So we allowed her to save face when she, lied. And that was a good lesson for me. That was a good lesson. He taught me to be respectful of all people, regardless of their race, religion, culture, sexuality, their opinions, to have an open and inquiring mind, to realize that, who am I to think that I know better than anybody else? I have my opinion, but Tom has his opinion, and Peggy has her opinion, and Linda has her opinion, and it's all okay. And just to be respectful of other people's opinions and not to judge a book by its cover. Frankly, I judged him by his cover when he met my mom. I thought he looked like Ziggy, and I thought she was crazy to give up the gorgeous younger man with the skating rink for this short, bald man who was, 16 years older than she was. Well, that was a big lesson to me. Don't judge a book by its cover. So anyway, and I learned these things about to be respectful of all these people, not because he told me that necessarily, but because I watched the way he lived his life. And he would treat a janitor the same way as the president of the United States. It didn't matter. He was always curious about their life. He was always respectful, always polite, always a good conversationalist. He never dismissed anybody. And he always let other people talk as much as they wanted to talk. And he was just a great man that way. He taught me to be generous and support the causes that are important to me when I could afford to do so. And in fact, one of the biggest legacies that he and my mom actually left to us as children when they died was that they left a good amount of money in a community foundation that then split into 6 shares, where each of us got our own charitable fund that we could direct how it goes. Now, they could have just left that to us as money, and we could have spent it any way we wanted. But they wanted us to continue their legacy of philanthropy, but to do it in a way that benefits the causes that we each chose, because we're all different people and we have different ideas about what we like and what we want to support. And so rather than impose their views on us, they just left us the charitable fund, and each one of us gets to do our own giving. And I just got to make my first gifts out of that charitable fund about a month ago, and it was just so fun. It felt so great to be able to support even further the causes that I like. But so Bill also taught me to be humble and gracious, just because he was humble and gracious. He was one of the most gracious people I've ever met, and one of the most humble. He would never tell you what an amazing man he was. He would never brag about anything. And, there's a story, and I think, Tom, I don't know if you heard this story when you listened to me give my legacy speech. I think I told it. But we lived, when he married my mom had bought a house in the country club subdivision. Now, the house needed some work, but she took what little alimony and settlement she got from my dad and bought this house. And then she married Bill. And because it was a bigger house than the one he lived in, and it could be renovated more easily, they decided to make that the house for all 8 of us. There were 6 now children and 2 of them. So they renovated this house, and we were living in it through the rest of my teenage years. And it was on the corner of a fancy road with fancy houses, 2 roads on the corner. But a few blocks away was a less privileged neighborhood, what in the South, as much as I hate to say it, everybody said across the tracks, very, very low income housing. And so a lot of times people would come from the lower income housing section, or maybe it wasn't just them, but that's where the direction they would come from. And they would throw cans out on the lawn at the corner of our house. And so the stop sign, they just stop and everybody throw their garbage out. My stepfather would go running in the mornings. And because he was humble and cheap, he would wear just old clothes. He didn't believe in buying special clothes. He would just wear old clothes. So we'd had an old pair of khakis. He'd roll up to his knees, a threadbare pair of black dress socks. He had nice running shoes. And then he wore like an old stained, sleeveless tank top with a see-through old blue button down that he would tie at his waist, and a very stained old baseball hat, was sweat stained. Well, he came back from running one day, and saw all these cans at the stop sign by our mailbox, and he started picking them up. And a car pulled up and assumed he was homeless and that he was picking up the cans to go turn them in for the 5 cent a can or whatever you get. And so they felt sorry for them. So they were like, here you go, buddy. And they just started shoveling all these cans out of their car onto our lawn so Bill could go turn them in for money. And rather than say to them, are you crazy? I live in that big white house up on the hill. You know, who do you think I am? He would never do that. He just said, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And he waited till the car drove off, and then he put him in his shirt, tied him up, and carried him upstairs and up to the house and threw him away. That's how humble and gracious he was. He would never make anybody feel bad when they were just trying to help him. So, you know, one of the other things that he really helped me to understand was that regardless of what anybody else thinks, never to make myself lesser than I am. You know, if I wanted to and I could afford to build a house that was nicer than maybe my friends could afford, it was okay to do that. I didn't have to, you know, bring myself down financially, mentally, spiritually, in any other way. I could live the life the way I am, and without being arrogant about anything, of course, but just be who you are and not to make yourself lesser. To give of myself, but never to give away myself, to be true to who I am and my authentic self, all the same time helping other people. He taught me that I can agree to disagree with people who think differently than I do and still love them, or like them, or just be neutral about them. It doesn't matter, but that I don't have to convince everybody to think the way I do. I can just agree to disagree. He taught me that a good education and a good work ethic are very important. I mean, there's so many lessons, and, you know, I've tried to then now instill these things in my children. So this legacy of what you leave into people can hopefully pass down through the generations. But I think most importantly, and I mean, I could go on stories forever, but, you know, he taught me to greet every person, every experience, everything you do with grace and a completely open and inquiring mind, because you never know where you might meet your next friend, your next teacher, your next partner, your next business opportunity. You don't know what you're going to meet or who you're going to meet or what you're going to experience. So don't turn your nose up at anything before you try it and see what happens. And basically, I think, you know, he taught me that even when things seem really bleak, because your father walks out in the middle of the night and abandons his family, things can turn around when you least expect it, and you can end up having a whole new family to enrich your life and the lives of your children for many generations to come. Because now my children have, you know, 3 aunts and uncles and their spouses that they wouldn't have had. They've got a whole bunch of cousins they wouldn't have had if my mom hadn't gotten remarried. And so you just don't know. And, you know, when he died, they scheduled his funeral 3 days after his death in the largest church in our town. We had to go actually to the chapel at Catawba College because it held the most number of people. And it was standing room only. There were people who couldn't even get inside the building. It held over 1,000 people, and they couldn't get everybody in the building. The Salisbury, North Carolina, where his hometown was, newspaper called him the Salisbury's Angel. His name was on the marquee of movie theaters, all that. Not because he ever wanted it to, or because he told people to do that, but just by the life that he lived and the things he did for his community. So when I think about living your legacy, this man lived it better than maybe anybody I know. So that's my very long story about Bill, and I could go on for days about him, but that's one really great story, or a bunch of stories, I guess.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all that. Again, I got to hear her give some of this at Dealmaker, and then she gave another speech very similar to this at Mr. Landlord in January, and really appreciate Mary for being a little vulnerable with this, and kind of like learning, like, but really you're what you're saying is absolutely true. There's a story here, and, you know, we all need to kind of learn some of these things. I wrote down about 13 different things that you wrote, that you said. There was probably a couple more that I missed because as you guys can see, sometimes people call her lightning lips. But really appreciate you giving that. You know, one of the things that I think is, you know, stands out is that he really wanted to kind of see who other people were. You know, really just wasn't just about, you know, what he wanted to do. He didn't just have an agenda, but like every little item that's on here, you know, if you had to pick one thing that kind of everything points back to, it really is like he wanted to get to know other people, and he wanted to kind of hear what their story was. And in so doing, you know, he kind of got to glean from all those things himself, and he got to learn probably a lot that he never would have learned, but also got to give them their time. And by doing that, in the end, he got his own time as well. And I hope even this, you know, kind of goes on and continues, you know, the story about Bill. And I'm proud of Mary for trying to, you know, push that on. And so I would love to ask you guys and everybody who's listening and everybody who listened to this call down the road, you know, what are you doing? Is there anything that maybe you need to change the way you treat people, or maybe we all need to start listening before we want to be heard. You know, maybe there's time for us to respect other people's opinions and just agree to disagree sometimes. That's totally fine. You know, and I also love the give of yourself, but don't give yourself away. You know, those are all, you know, great attributes of Bill. And I appreciate you for giving that. So we are going to switch topics a little bit pretty quickly here. And it kind of, I mean, it goes together a little bit, but definitely kind of has a little bit of a different, you know, feel to it, because, you know, Mary is, you know, has done estate planning for many different people. A lot of my friends that I know have used her, been super happy. She kind of created a quick PowerPoint for us about mistakes that people make with estate planning. So I'm going to kind of let her switch over to that. And then at the end, hopefully we'll have some time for some questions as well. If you guys do have questions, don't be afraid to put those in the chat. I'll try to bring those up. I try not to interrupt as much as I wanted to kind of let Mary go, because I know that once she gets going, she can kind of really, you know, go. And she knows this topic, and I'm really proud of her for this, and I'm really appreciative that you invested in our community today. So 5 mistakes or more.
I think there are more on these slides, but well, and for those of you who don't know me, a little background about why I can talk about this. I've been an attorney for 32 years, going on 32 years. I'm retired now, but I still consult on these things. But I practiced estate planning for 30 years. And so I've seen a lot of things. I practiced in Alaska and I practiced in North Carolina, and I've represented thousands and thousands of people in estate planning. So I've seen a lot. And I've seen some very common mistakes that happen all the time. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I do talk fast, so I'll try not to talk too fast. And let me see if I can move on. So the first mistake that I see is people not having an estate plan at all. And I tend to find that people think, I don't need an estate plan unless I'm famous, rich, you know, got tons and tons of money. I don't have kids. I don't need an estate plan. I'm 18. I don't need an estate plan, whatever it is. And I'm here to tell you that that's stinking thinking, and that every person 18 years and older needs to have some sort of estate plan. Doesn't have to be fancy, but you need some sort of estate plan. And by an estate plan, what do I mean? Well, there are different documents that we use in an estate plan, and I'll go through that in a minute, a little bit. So I don't know exactly what will work for you, but usually at a minimum, they are a will and some advanced directives, powers of attorney and things like that. We'll talk about more about that in a minute, but that's kind of at a minimum. In some states, you can handwrite your will. You're getting ready to get on an airplane and you think, oops, I don't have an estate plan. Mary Hart's going to kill me. You can handwrite it in many states as long as it's all in your own handwriting. You'll have to check your own state law to see if that's allowed. It's called a holographic will, HOLOGRAPHIC, holographic will. Check your state law. But don't wait around. Even if you put something very, very simple in place, it's better than nothing. What is that saying? Don't seek perfection. There's a saying about good enough but done is better than perfect that's not done. Something like that. Do you know what I'm talking about? Anyway, so do something. Well, I'll talk about that in a minute. Let's see. This is the next one. The next biggest mistake is having to do it yourself. Huh?
I said good enough is done.
Good enough is done. Now I say that, and you can do your own a will and things like that, But I will tell you that when you DIY it, do it yourself, I have seen more problems than not with a DIY estate plan. Now, I don't draft documents anymore, so I'm not out there trying to get a job. I'm telling you this because every will contest I've ever seen or every trust issue I've ever seen has been through documents that were either handwritten or created through an online program like LegalZoom. And why is that? It's because you don't know what you don't know. And so you don't ask yourself the right questions. And sometimes this software is too simplistic and does not ask enough questions or go far enough down the if this, then this track to be a complete document for you. It will work, but it may not work for you. It will be a will, but it may not work for you or do the things you want. The other reason, particularly with the handwritten documents, is that you know what's in your head, but getting it down on paper in a way that is not vague can be difficult. And in the law, a vague document or one that doesn't make complete sense to a third party who doesn't know what was in your head is not enforceable. If it's vague, a court can't enforce it. And you may think, and this happens to all of us, no matter what you're doing, whether it's an email, you know what's in your head, you think you have communicated that to the other person. But how many times does an email or a text message get misunderstood because what was in your head isn't really the way it came across on paper? Well, think about that in the context of an estate plan. You're putting down what you think is right, but it's not complete or it's not comprehensible. So I highly recommend that you use an attorney to do your estate plan. And some of you might have heard me say this before. I always think of using the law has two sides to it. There's the shield of the law that you can use in a proactive way to protect yourself. And then there's the sword of the law, the reactive way, that thing that you can use to fight the battle if you didn't protect yourself in the first place. And it's always more expensive to use the sword of the law to fix a problem than it is to use the shield of the law to protect yourself right in the first place. So don't be cheap, as John Hart would say. Us real estate investors are cheap, cheap, cheap. Don't be cheap. Hire a lawyer to do your estate plan if you have not already. So that's mistake number 2. Mistake number 3 I see are people who try to do their estate plan. They're doing the right thing, but they're thinking only about like, what if I get disabled, or only about what if I die? And you need to cover both those scenarios in your estate plan. So we cover things that happen during life with the documents we call advance directives, so that you're directing in advance what happens if you can't make your own decisions, for instance. So we might have a healthcare power of attorney who makes your healthcare decisions for you if you can't do it. A financial power of attorney, what we call a durable power of attorney. That brings up another mistake I'll throw in here in a second. A durable power of attorney, which is for everything but healthcare. Who pays your bills? Who hires the housekeeper if you have one? Who makes decisions, for where you live? Things like that. The living will, which is what we crudely call the pull the plug document. If you end up in a terminal situation that would otherwise result in your death in a relatively short period of time, but you're being kept alive on artificial life support, do you want that life support to continue, or do you want the plug to be pulled? And if you would not want to be kept alive on artificial life support, if that's the only thing keeping you alive and you're never going to come out of it, then you need to have this living will. Some states call it a declaration of a desire for a natural death, whatever it is. We call it the pull the plug document. But the living will, that's a document that gives your healthcare agent the power to terminate life support if you're in one of those situations, rather than being kept alive for years and years and years when you're probably brain dead and you're eviscerating the wealth that you have created for your family through medical bills. So always make sure that you've got all the documents to cover what might happen if you have an issue during your lifetime, whether that's temporarily or permanently, disability, and what happens at death, whether that's a will, a trust, will and a trust, which is what I recommend. So make sure you cover both of those scenarios. Next mistake, and this is the biggest one and takes the most time to talk about. I see this every day, almost to this day, every day, even when I'm not practicing law. We are never taught how assets pass at death. And because we don't know how assets pass at death, we don't know the right documents to use to have certain assets pass certain ways at death. What do I mean by that? Well, we've all grown up hearing about your last will and testament. You're watching TV and there's the reading of the will where everything gets, who gets what. First of all, by the way, in 32 years of practicing and as an estate planning lawyer, I've never been to a reading of the will, nor have I had one. That's for TV mostly only. So you don't need a reading of the will. But what happens is that the last will and testament, we all think that will pass everything we have an ownership interest in. Oh, it's my last will and testament. I'm going to write everything in there about who gets what. But what we don't realize is that a will only governs those assets that are in your separate name at the time of your death. What do I mean by that? I mean literally that. Only your name is on the title as a single individual. There's no joint owner with a right of survivorship. There is no beneficiary designation. It is not in a trust that has beneficiaries. It is literally just in your name. So if I have my house in my name, Mary Hart, on the deed, that is what we call a probate asset. It will pass through my will. But if I own my house as Mary and Frank Hart as joint with a right of survivorship, that's my husband, then if I die before my husband, my half of the house doesn't go through my will. It goes directly to my husband the moment I take my last breath, because the deed says Mary and Frank as joint tenants with a right of survivorship, or in some states between married people, tenants by the entirety. Works essentially the same way in terms of passing to the survivor automatically. If I own this house in my revocable living trust, it's not in my name, so it doesn't go through my will. It's in my name as a trustee of my trust, but that's not my individual name. I'm wearing a different hat. So my house in the name of, it's not my trust name, but we'll call it that, the Mary Hart Living Trust. If my deed reads Mary Hart Living Trust as the owner, then that house is going to pass to whomever I have said it will pass in the terms of my trust document. So if I leave a will and I say, hey, I leave my house to Tom Olson, but it is owned with my husband and I, Tom's not going to get my half of the house. It's going to go to my husband as a joint owner with a right of survivorship. If I leave a will and say, I leave my house to Tom, but my house is owned in my trust, it's not going to go to Tom. Doesn't matter that it's a perfectly valid will that says it's going to Tom. It's going to go by the terms of my trust. So what people need to understand is how assets pass at death. So you know what document controls when you die. So what are those options? Again, if something is in your sole individual name with no named beneficiary, it's going to pass through your will if you have one. And if you don't have one, the legislature in your state has created one for you, and it will pass according to the terms of the legislative will, I call it. If it is owned by you and one or more individuals as joint owners with a right of survivorship, or as tenants by the entirety, if you're married and in one of those states, it will pass automatically to the surviving joint owner the moment you take your last breath. Just like if the other person dies first, it will pass to you the moment he or she takes the last breath. It's survivor takes all. If you own an asset, let's say a stock account or life insurance policy or retirement account that has a designated beneficiary, that is a contract between you and the company holding that asset that says, when I die, pass the asset to my beneficiary. So let's take an IRA. Let's say you guys have a self-directed IRA. Well, let's take me. Let's say I have a self-directed IRA, which I do. This particular IRA I'm thinking about goes to my 3 children. Well, it has a beneficiary designation that says that. That's by contract. So when I die, that will automatically pass to my 3 children. If I changed my will and I wasn't thinking about it and I said I'd leave that IRA to my husband, who would get it? Not my husband, the 3 kids, because it's not governed by my will. It's governed by that contract we call a beneficiary designation form. If an asset is titled in the name of a trust, it's going to pass according to the terms of that trust when you die. So that trust will have language in it that says where it goes. Only if the trust says give it to my estate will it then pass into my estate and go through my will or my legislative will. So I always tell people, one of the best things you can do for yourself is get a little spreadsheet, get on Excel or whatever, and create the following columns. Column number 1, name the asset, whatever it is, your house, your car, your stock account, your IRA, your LLC, your land trust, whatever it is. So column number 1, write the asset. Column number 2, write how it is legally titled, literally how it's titled. You may have to go look at the signature cards at the bank. You may have to call your stockbroker to find out. You may need to look at the deeds because, by the way, people always mess this up because they misremember how they set it up when they started the asset, when they bought it, when they set it up at the bank, whatever it is. So look at the actual titling document to find out how it's titled. Is it just in your name? Is it in a trust? Is it you with a joint owner? If so, is there a right of survivorship? If there's not a right of survivorship, let's say it's a deed that says to Tom and Mary as tenants in common. That means we'll say 50-50. That means my half is considered my separate asset and Tom's half is his separate asset. What does that mean? My 50% goes through my will and Tom's goes through his will. See how that's different from joint with the right of survivorship? If Tom and I own that house as joint with the right of survivorship and I died, Tom inherits it. If we own that as tenants in common and I die, my half is going to pass through my will. If Tom and I own it in a land trust or any trust, it's going to pass according to the terms of that trust. So create that spreadsheet. So first, the name of the asset, second column, how it's legally titled. Make sure you know it's right. Third column, what document controls how it passes at death? Is it a will because it's in your separate name? Is it a trust because it's in a trust? Is it a beneficiary designation form because it has a beneficiary designation? Is it a joint ownership and will pass to the joint owner? So you see where I'm going with that. I could beat this dead horse for a day about this and people still would get it wrong because we're not taught this. It's very, very critical that somebody teaches us this and nobody does.
Actually, to me, I've never heard it explained like just kind of so simple. It is kind of a complex topic. It really, nobody would say that it's super easy. But after hearing, I don't know, probably 300 different people over the last 10 years talk about this topic, I've never really heard it talked so simple of, hey, just get a spreadsheet, list every possible asset. And when you're talking about assets, it's not just houses, it's not just properties. That's the first thing we want to think about, right? But it's cash. Maybe you've got accounts in gold. Like I've got different accounts with different people. It could be other investments. It could be, funds that you might invest in. It could be every single asset. That's going to be probably the hardest thing to really put together because
that's
really
why it's so important.
Look at everything. Right.
Yeah, just start. It may take you 6 months to make this list. Like for me, and by the way, this can turn into a degree to your personal financial statement when you start putting values and mortgages and all that on that spreadsheet. But so for me, like when I'm going through it, I have a very, very diverse portfolio of asset classes. I've got things that are owned in my estate planning trust. I've got things that are owned in personal property trusts. I've got things in my IRA. I've got things that are owned jointly. I've got things that are owned in an LLC. We got to take it a step further with an LLC. Who owns the LLC? So if I have a house that's owned by an LLC, then I got to look at, well, who owns the LLC? Because what's going to be going through my estate or passing at my death is my LLC shares. Do I own my LLC shares in my separate name? Are they owned in my estate planning trust, my revocable living trust? Are they owned in a personal property trust? Are they owned jointly with the right of survivorship, which I hardly ever see in LLC shares? See what I mean? So you got to take it that step further. You can't just say it's in an LLC. You got to put the LLC shares are the asset. And how is that titled? Do you have physical gold and silver? Where do you keep it? How does anybody know that that's yours? Right? You need to put that down somewhere. My husband and I share a safe. Some things are his, some things are mine. In our estate planning documents, we have a list of what's his and what's mine. So we know what passes to each person. In my revocable living trust, frankly, I don't own anything. I'm trying not to. Some things slip through the cracks I got to fix, but I try not to own anything in my separate name. And that's one of my future slides here, is because probate stinks in many states. So let's say I had a physical asset, gold or a jet ski or whatever. I'm going to title it in the name of my revocable estate planning trust, my revocable living trust. So maybe my car title reads the Mary Hart Living Trust instead of Mary Hart. I don't want to have to probate over one car. Maybe my physical assets like my furniture, any gold, any jewelry, any rugs, antiques. I've done a bill of sale, selling those to my living trust for $10 and other valuable consideration, right? That gets it into my trust in terms of ownership. If I have a bank account that's not, an LLC account or something, I want that owned in the name of my living trust. My stock account, if it's just between me, just mine, is in the name of my living trust. I try not to have anything in my separate name because I don't want to use a will and go through probate. Now I have a will. I have a will because if I forget something and something ends up in my separate name, I have what we call a pour over will that basically leaves everything that goes through my probate estate, that goes through my will. It leaves it to my revocable living trust so that it then passes according to the terms of the trust. I would have to go through probate for those assets that were in my separate individual name, but I don't have to repeat all my dispositive provisions, who gets what, in my will. So if you do a revocable living trust, you have to have a pour over will.
Do you say
Now,
irrevocable or revocable?
Revocable. Revocable trust is what we use mostly for in lieu of a will, but you still have a backup will. There are uses for irrevocable trust, but that's beyond the scope of this presentation. There are many, many types of trust for many different uses, but
I do have one quick question before we move on, if you don't mind, Mary.
Yeah.
But so businesses. So like a lot of the people on the call probably do real estate. They probably do deals, and almost every one of those deals are in the business. Like, do you have a typical recommendation or scenario that the businesses? I feel like even for me, I'm kind of everything else I think is explanatory and helps me understand. But businesses, like what do you typically see as the best for businesses?
Yeah, so it depends on what you're doing for your estate plan. But let's use me, because I have a lot of businesses, a lot of LLCs, and my estate plan, the hallmark of it is using a revocable living trust, meaning I can revoke it, terminate it, change it, whatever. A revocable living trust to avoid probate and to provide privacy. That's the hallmark of my estate plan, the big piece in the middle of it. So I want to make sure that all my assets that don't have a joint owner with a right of survivorship, that all my assets are titled in the name of that trust. So let's say my businesses, I'm in a partnership or an LLC, I call it a partnership, it's an LLC, with two other people. My 1/3 of that LLC, I am not the member. My revocable living trust is the member. That's what puts it in there. If I have a corporation that's not a professional corporation, and I can name my trust as the shareholder of that corporation, I will. Now, you have to be careful with S corporations, because only certain types of trusts can own S corporation shares, or it will result in the termination of your S corporation election. So you can do a revocable living trust, but you've got to put certain terms in it. That's why it's not a DIY project. So, it depends on what you're doing in your estate plan. If you want to just say, hey, I'm just going to leave everything to my spouse, then you could just be joint with the right of survivorship and name your spouse as the other joint owner of your LLC shares or your corporation shares. The problem with that is you're avoiding probate on the first death, but not on the second death. Because Tom, you die, you leave it to Becky. Whoops, now it's in Becky's individual name and you've got to go through probate on her death. So that's my least favorite way to do it. But anyway, I think, and this is a key thing. If you do an estate plan that involves a revocable living trust, one of the other big mistakes I see, people pay lawyers a lot of money to set up these beautiful trusts, and then the lawyers send them away with a to-do list. Go change the title to your assets to the name of this trust. They probably even tell them how to do it, but the people never do it. So now they've got this glorious trust they paid $4,000 for, and guess what? It means nothing. You might as well torch that paper unless you put the assets in it. Putting the assets in the name of the trust is what effectuates the trust and makes it avoid probate for those assets. So that's a huge mistake that I saw so many times when people would come to me. They had a beautiful trust. Or let's say somebody died. The spouse would come to me and say, I need to now administer my wife's, revocable living trust. Like, great, what are all the assets? They give me a list of assets. How are they titled? Well, I don't know. I guess it must be in the trust. Well, let's look at the titling documents. We go back and nobody ever changed anything. I'm like, well, this is a beautiful 80 pages, but it means nothing. You have to go through probate because everything was in your wife's name, or now you own it, but when you die, it's going to go through probate. So that's a huge mistake. Make sure that you do the follow through.
But in that scenario, if that was a business, they would really just need to name the business, because all the assets that the business owned would automatically go by just that one.
Right. So let's follow this through. Let's take a little piece of paper. I'm going to try to, can you see this if I hold that up? So let's say I'm going to draw a little diagram and we'll show everybody. Hold on just one second. Okay. So we've got, you buy a house, it's in an LLC. The LLC is owned by the Revocable Living Trust. That's the member, you as trustee of the Revocable Living Trust, and you own the Revocable Living Trust. That's the hierarchy. And so you don't, everything stops at the Revocable Living Trust side for probate. That trust now dictates what happens to that LLC, which in turn dictates what happens to the house. Does that make sense?
Yep. Nope. I'm just saying you don't have to redo anything with all the other assets. It's just the business.
No. So let's say you have an LLC and it's got 10 houses deeded into it, and it's got 5 bank accounts and 3 cars and an excavator, whatever it is. They're already titled in the name of the LLC, or should be. All you're doing is changing the membership on the LLC. So for me, let's say I had an LLC that was before I did my Revocable Living Trust, and I personally was the member. Or let's say my partnerships, if we set it up and I was Mary Hart as the member of the LLC. All I have to do now is do an assignment. It's 1 paragraph. I, Mary Hart, assign to Mary Hart as trustee of the Mary Hart Living Trust all of my right, title, and interest into my membership shares in 123 LLC. It's just a 1 paragraph assignment. Put it with the corporate records. Boom. I just made, my member of the LLC be my trust. I, Mary Hart, assigned my ownership in that LLC from me individually to me as the trustee of my Revocable Living Trust. That's all that was necessary to basically take that LLC and put it into the trust bucket. Now it's owned by the trust. So now when I die, that LLC will not be subject to probate. It will pass according to the terms of my Revocable Living Trust, and with it, all of the assets in the LLC. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Ready to move off the slide?
I think there's a question, but I think you just answered that. The lady just said, what's the process to change the ownership for the LLC into the Revocable Living Trust? I think you just explained that. So
yeah, you do not need new LLCs. I would not set up new LLCs. You just change the membership by signing it. Just think about it as if you were going to give your LLC interest to anybody or sell them to anybody. How do you do it? It's just like you're transferring any asset to a third party. If it's real property, you're going to transfer that by a deed. If it's an LLC interest, you're going to assign that interest to the new owner, which is your trust. If it's a car, you're going to retitle it in the name of the trust. If it's a bank account, you're going to probably open a new bank account in the name of the trust and transfer the assets in there. See what I mean? Just treat that trust as if it was a third party. How would you transfer to the third party? Okay. All right, let's move on. Oops. How do I get this to go? Hold on a second. Okay. So we just basically talked about this one for the most part, but why is it important to avoid probate? Every state is a little bit different, or can be different, on how they run the probate process. And remember, probate only happens when you own assets in your individual name that would go through your will or the legislative will if you don't have one for yourself. So that probate is the process by which you turn the will into the court, get someone appointed as your executor, what we now call a personal representative, notify creditors, file the inventory of all the assets in that decedent's separate name, get all the bills paid, distribute the assets, file accountings along the way, file an annual account, blah, blah, blah. See, it's a pain in the rear end, right? Some states make it easy and cheap to do that, but it still takes a long time just because there's certain steps you have to take and certain things you cannot do until a certain amount of time has gone by. Some states, it's not simple at all. It's awful. My mom has been dead almost 2 years. I'm trying to deal with 1 car. Everything else got put in her trust. We missed 1 car because she never let me get the duplicate title and she couldn't find her title. 2 years. for one junked out, smoke-filled car that we're just trying to give away. One car. So try to avoid probate because it's pain. All right. We talked about this in an example with you, Tom, not avoiding probate on the death of the surviving spouse. So I would meet with a couple and they would say, well, I don't need a trust because my spouse and I own everything as joint tenants with the right of survivorship. So when I die, everything is going to go to my spouse. I'm like, that's great. You're right. You don't need a trust on the first death. But now the surviving spouse owns everything in his or her name. Boom, we're in probate, unless then the surviving spouse makes a trust then and sets it all up. Well, when the first spouse dies, is the surviving spouse still competent to make a trust? Will they think about doing it? Will they go through with that? Or are they just busy grieving their wife or husband who just died? I think it's better to set it up from the get-go while both people are alive and competent, that you will avoid probate on both deaths. That's my preference. Okay, this is a crucial one. Not leaving enough accessible cash or easily liquidatable assets to cover expenses after death. What do I mean by that? It takes some time. Now, if you have a trust, it's easier, but it takes some time to get access to money to pay bills after death. If you're going through probate, you've got to get the probate opened. You've got to get the letters testamentary from the court to allow you to access the deceased person's assets. So it takes some time. Sometimes we have expenses that have to be covered right away. So what I like to do is make sure that people are thinking about their liquidity needs, and maybe there's one account that would have enough cash in it to cover those expenses. And it is a joint with the right of survivorship account if you're married. So it would go outright to the spouse and he or she would have cash to pay those expenses, or maybe it's a stock account that is done the same way. Or if you don't have a spouse, whoever let's say it's your children, can you make it joint with them or something? So there's cash. Now, keep in mind, anything you leave joint to someone else, they inherit it right away and they don't have to use it for your expenses after you die. So you only want to do this with somebody you trust. No like and trust. Spouses are usually mostly safe bets. Children, you never know. You never know. Like for me, I have 3 kids. If I left an account with $100,000 in it to all 3 kids, maybe 2 of the 3 would say, yeah, let's just use it to cover mom's expenses after death. And maybe the 3rd one would run off to, Switzerland and ski the Alps. I don't know. But you just got to be careful about that. But think about how that's going to be taken care of, or if it's in a trust, if everything is in assets that are hard to liquidate because everything's in an LLC or real estate, even if it passes quickly to the trustee, the alternate trustee to manage, how they're going to have to liquidate assets to get to cash. So maybe keep one account in that trust that has cash or mutual funds or stocks or something you can easily liquidate that would cover the immediate expenses right after death. Okay. All right. This is a key one, key concept, I think, for a lot of people whose spouses particularly are not involved in the business. My spouse is not involved in my investments or my business. It's my second marriage. Most of this stuff was done before he entered into my life. So it's in my name and I manage it. Even our properties, stuff that we own together, he doesn't even know how they're titled really. And he doesn't know how the bills get paid because I pay all the bills. He doesn't know what's on auto pay, what I have to write a check for, what account it comes out of, what business it goes to, blah, blah, blah. So please let your spouse or whoever's going to be in charge of your stuff know where to find information about all these things. Like I'm in the process of trying to put together a list of, for every property, what's on auto pay, what account it comes out of, what's not on auto pay, like say property taxes, when that bill is due, what account it should be paid out of, blah, blah, blah. And one of the things I'm hoping to do is put together basically a legacy book. I've heard it called legacy book, angel book. I used to call it information for my spouse and heirs or something like that, something boring, but basically a little booklet that you can do online or in your own handwriting or on a Word document, letting your spouse know all these things if they're not involved and they don't know where everything is. Because most of my friends who are involved in the business, either their spouse is not involved, or if the spouse is involved, they handle very different parts of the business and they don't know what each other does, right? So write it down. Tom, you look like you had a question or a comment.
No, I'm just wondering if you have like one or two more key ones here. We're already at the top of the hour.
Oh,
past-
I think I just have one more maybe. Let
Okay,
me
cool.
just-
And if anybody's got any questions, feel free to start, kind of putting those in the chat now. And I just really do appreciate
That was
you,
it.
Mary, for being on. Oh, that was the last one?
That was the last one.
Okay, cool. All right, does anybody have any other further questions that they'd like to ask Mary? Or this has been really great. I'm not sure how many you had, but I had 10 of those biggest mistakes, and I definitely have some to-dos written down for myself personally, which I think the first thing that you can do is really do that spreadsheet. Like, just do the research yourself on your own assets.
Yeah.
And that'll kind of really start leading that. And I think, if you don't have a revocable living trust, that's another, great step of things that you can do. But really get with an attorney. I don't know one question I have, Mary, you keep saying you don't do this. Are there people that you could recommend to people to help with this?
It depends on where you are, because it's usually very state specific. So there are ways to find them. There's a group called Martindale-Hubbell, and they put out a website. I think it's called lawyers.com, but you could also Google Martindale, all one word, Martindale-Hubbell, Hubbell, I think. And they rate lawyers, and you can search them by practice area, by location, and lawyers rate each other. It's a peer-to-peer rating system. So you're looking for an AV rated lawyer is the top one, if they still do the system the same way, AV for Apple Victor. But go to lawyers.com or martindalehubbell.com. I can't remember which one it is, or both, and search for an estate planning lawyer in your area. And then I would, pick 2 or 3 of those, and I would call them and I'd ask them questions and see how much experience they have with estates that include the types of assets that you have. The biggest issue that we find is that for people who are real estate investors, there are a lot of lawyers who just don't know anything about real estate investing. They don't understand it. They don't know what a wrap loan is, or self-directed IRA, or a personal property trust, or what all these LLCs are for, and blah, blah, blah. And if you run into that problem, you can contact me, and I'll put my email and phone number in the chat in a second. You can contact me, because one of the things I do, and I don't really advertise it other than things like this, is I do serve as a consultant to people and can be a liaison with your lawyer if necessary, to sort of explain in lawyer terms to the other lawyer what we're talking about. Because I find that there can be a disconnect between the way lawyers hear things and the way lay people say things, non-lawyers say things. And so, like, I've had to teach, for lack of a better word, other lawyers what a land trust is without offending them or, injuring somebody's ego. So I do that as a paid consultation service if you ever need me. Let me put that stuff in the chat.
I have a question, Tom, Mary. What, I'm sure it's different for every case, but what's some average prices we should be able to expect to do to get a good job done like this?
Yeah, I have not charged myself for a few years, but back when I was doing it, it should roughly be the same. I would say for your generic, relatively vanilla estate plan with a revocable living trust, a pour over will, and advanced directives, my average, I would say $4,000. Now you can find some as cheap as maybe $2,500. There are people who'll say they'll do it for $1,500. I am leery about those people. In my experience, the ones who are charging anything less than $2,500 really don't know what they're doing. They're just offering it as a side service. They're a real estate lawyer. Yeah, I can put this trust together for you, but they don't really understand estate planning as well. Or they're a factory.
Right, they're using boilerplates and
or they're a factory where they're not taking your situation into consideration. They're just popping out the exact same document for everybody and sticking your name in the first page. So if I were planning it myself, I would plan to pay somewhere from $3,000 to $5,000. That's what I would allocate. Depending on how complex my situation is, it could be more than that. But for just the revocable living trust, the will, and the advanced directives, I'd say, $3,000 to $5,000.
Okay, and a follow-up to that is when you're looking for an attorney, I would think you'd want to find one that specializes in estate planning.
Yes. You definitely need You definitely need an estate planning lawyer, not a real estate lawyer who throws in a few wills on the side, not a corporate lawyer who does a few wills or trusts on the side. You need someone who is an estate planning lawyer. Yeah, unless you truly have a very, very, very simple situation where you just do a will that says, I leave everything to my spouse and then to my kids. No trust, no layering of entities, none of that. But if you have something more complex than that, I would go with an estate planning lawyer.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions for Mary? Mary, you must be talking to really smart people, or
or it's just overwhelming.
Or you must have explained it super well. Mary also has a group. I'm not even sure exactly the whole thing behind AIM, but I did want you to talk a little bit about AIM and what you can offer people through your network as well. And I wanted to invite people, to be a part of that if you guys so choose. And I wanted to allow Mary the opportunity to talk about her group as well.
Sure. So AIM actually stands for Alternative Investing Movement. And it grew out of my desire to help teach financial literacy and investing. It started out, I wanted to teach young people, but then a whole bunch of other people said, well, don't leave me out. So we made it bigger, but it's rather than teaching on one specific topic of real estate investing, it's a broader platform. We have the AIM Hire Academy, which is a mentorship platform. And it's either $149 a month, or I think you get 2 months free if you pay for a whole year at the time. And what we do, so we have a bunch of resources we're putting on the platform, and a lot of different types of investments, and including private lending and notes and syndications and, multifamily, single family, all that kind of stuff. And then we do a Zoom call twice a month now. 1 month is education, and 1 week is education based, where either I or a guest speaker will present a topic. The third week is first and third Thursday at noon. Third week is Q&A, where we might bring up something. It's pretty much free for all Q&A. But the AIM platform not only has the real estate investing piece, but it has asset protection piece, estate planning piece. It's got a lot more. So we probably already have 50 or 60 hours worth of video uploaded from our Zoom calls and other videos that I've done. And I'm always continuing to fill out more information on the platform. So my email address was on there, and you can see it's Mary Hart at alternativeinvestingmovement.com, which unfortunately is a very long email. But that URL, alternativeinvestingmovement.com, will take you to the website that tells about the membership. That's all it has on it right now, what you get and how you join, and it allows you to join that way. But the other thing I was going to say, so I do 3 things. I've got that membership. I do private consulting, which is either $500 an hour, which now I know is half price of what John Hire charges, and he used to be cheaper than me, so he's gone way up. Or if you consult with me by the day, like either come where I am or we do a Zoom call all day, it's cheaper. I don't remember what it is for the day. It's like $3,000 or $3,500 for 8 hours. So it's a little bit of a discount. And what I do in those consultations is try to be like, if you're sitting at a rat maze, you know where you are, you know where you want to go, but you don't know how to get there. I'm the giant eye in the sky that tells you turn left, go right, do this, do that. And because I have so many years of experience, not only as a real estate investor, as a lender, as a real estate agent, as a 1031 qualified intermediary, as a real estate attorney, tax attorney, corporate attorney, blah, 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 I know a lot. And so I can help issue spot for a lot of things. And then we come up with a game plan that you take to your attorney to execute. So if that makes sense. And then I'll probably start putting together estate planning boot camps again. I think I may be doing one this year in Richmond, Virginia, where we basically do a 2-day boot camp where we do small numbers of people, and we can dig down into a lot of minutia and get a lot of questions answered. And I'm trying to structure it in a way where we can actually have some sort of templated questionnaires where I can help you walk through and make decisions for you to take to your lawyer. So that's probably going to come up sometime this year, I think, starting in Richmond, Virginia. So by the way, if you want to be on my email list to get notified of those things, you can shoot me the email. The email address is in the chat. I'll just add you to the mailing list. No obligation. You just get notified if we do things.
Awesome. So the best email to email you then, Mary, is the Mary Hart at alternativeinvestingmovement.com. That's where.
Yeah.
So
And
guys are
it's long, but once you put it in your email, it'll pre-populate, hopefully.
If you guys are interested in either AIM, or if you're interested in being on her email list, I would recommend getting on it. I like to be on people's email lists that are in my network anyways, just so I kind of know what's going on with them. So I'd highly recommend Mary and everything that she does. And thank you again, Mary, for investing in our community today. Hopefully you guys were had a little bit of a blessing. To me, it's a blessing to be able to have her on, but also, like, to me, this is valuable information. You have to think about how much money this could save you, and not just money, but how much headache this can save you and save your family. This isn't for you, like I'm thinking about right now, even trying to do some estate planning for my parents.
Or your kids. Or your kids.
This is true. Yeah, this is true. So once your kids get to 18 years old, and they start doing things, they need to start having these things. Mary found out about that, with a situation with her own kid, trying to give direction to a doctor, and the doctor's like, sorry, ma'am, get out of here. You don't have any rights right now.
It was his 18th birthday. I just wasn't thinking that it was his birthday. So all three of my boys got an estate plan for their 18th birthday. That's what they got from me.
So you do need me to think about, my kids aren't quite 18 yet, but they will be coming upon that. Is that Lily just turned 17, so a year from this month here.
Particularly like healthcare power of attorney, durable power of attorney, if they got a tax refund or anything else. I mean, you just need to be able to help your kids out if they need it.
And if they know it when they're young, this is something that, knowledge that you can, give them when they're young, and they'll probably protect themselves down the road for many different possible pitfalls. And be that, it's a lot cheaper to be the shield when you're younger, right? Than it is when you're older as well. So it's cheaper. I love that statement. It's cheaper to be to use the shield than to use the sword, but it's even way cheaper to do it when you're younger and put that shield up when you're younger, because then you really protect everything that you do from then on forward. You kind of already have that plan going forward.
And I am best for my kids. So because I wanted them to avoid probate, they now have moved from wills to revocable living trusts, and I'm the trustee with their permission. They can kick me out anytime, but now I can manage all their money. And my kids are 23 to 30. I can manage stuff for them. They're in graduate school and all that. But it will avoid probate if something happens to them and their brothers or their beneficiaries, because none of them are married yet. Yeah, anyway, so they're just ways you can set it up that it's easier. And I call it the ultimate love letter. And I'm going to write a book one day about that. It's the ultimate love letter, what you can do for your family, the ultimate love letter.
I absolutely love it. So thank you again, Mary, for being on with us today. I do want to remind everybody about next.
Sorry, that was my watch.
Okay, sorry. So I do want to remind everybody about next call, April 10th with Leon Johnson. I promise you guys are not going to want to miss that. And for the local people, don't forget about this Thursday is our next meetup group, 6 o'clock. Kevin Hutnick. This is going to be the last meeting that we're doing for free. After that, there will be a sign up that we'll have. It's super inexpensive. It's not going to be, we're not trying to make a bunch of money on it. We're just trying to cover our costs on this. But this Thursday, don't forget about the local meetup group here with Kevin. So there's no more chats there. I got to run, guys. I do apologize. But we're almost already at 11:30 anyways. But thanks again, Mary, for being on today. And hope everybody else has a blessed day. And remember to be a conduit, not a bucket, guys. Work to have to give. God bless.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Mary.